Okay, so here we go, finishing off the tan. These are the identifying features of it. For amplitude, it's undefined because it doesn't have a max and a min to calculate the amplitude. So there is no max or min, therefore you cannot determine an amplitude. Equation of the axis is y equals 0. That means the middle point and the period is equal to pi. All right, let's move on to the next one. We also have to look at the domain. What is the domain of a tan function? Well, you'd think it would be belongs to real, but it doesn't belong to real because there is some asymptotes. Now, are there only two or are there more asymptotes? And the answer to that question is there are asymptotes that repeat themselves each and every single time. So let's look at what the asymptotes would be at. Pi over 2. The next one would be at 3 pi over 2, then 5 pi over 2, then 7 pi over 2, and going backwards, we would have it at negative pi over 2, negative 3 pi over 2, negative 5 pi over 2. So what we're looking at, folks, is we're looking at an odd number of pi over 2's. So how do I write this domain? Well, let's look carefully. Theta will not equal certain values. Those values are odd numbered pi over 2's. So odd number. So we're looking at this. What we're looking at here is an odd number of pi over 2's. That's what this 2n plus 1 means. An even number plus 1 will always yield an odd number. So an odd numbered pi over 2. Okay, an odd numbered pi over 2 where n is actually an integer, meaning that you couldn't have decimal values or fraction values for n. They would have to be positive or negative whole numbers. All right, what would the range be? Well, the range is, again, remember that this is an odd valued number of pi over 2, and the range is y belongs to real. So the range is easy, and the domain is slightly tricky, so be very careful when you're looking at that. All right, next part. We're going to go right into 6.4, folks. So 6.4 is the transformations of trigonometric functions. So with the transformations, it's exact same values we've been looking at before. A, K, D, and C, where A has to do with the vertical stretch or compress on a vertical reflection. K has to do with the horizontal stretch or compress and a horizontal reflection. D has to look like the horizontal translation of left or right. And finally, C has to do with the vertical translation of up or down. And the function could be, in this case, sine, cosine, or tangent. When you're mapping it onto a table of values, this is always the case that you map onto these values. Now, these particular A, K, D, and C have special features with respect to the sine, cosine, and tan. Those would be the following. A, the absolute of A, means that that is the amplitude. Remember that the negative only implies that there's some reflection. Amplitude does not have a sign, so it will always be positive. So the absolute of A is actually your amplitude. 2 pi over K in sine or cos, or in the case of tan, it would be pi over absolute of K, means that what we're looking at here is this will imply your period. This will equal your period. So remember, K is not your period. 2 pi over K is your period for sine and cos, or pi over K is your period if it's tan. D, the horizontal translation, represents a phase shift, so a movement of left or right in phases. And y equals C represents the equation of the axis. Now keep in mind, very important, that the x must have a coefficient of 1. This is something that some people tend to forget. So please make sure that you look at stuff like this. This is not new, so I don't feel that I need to do an example, but keep in mind that maybe I'll give you a graph and I'll ask you to find the equation. So you need to be able to answer the following. What's the amplitude? Put the value here. Is the graph upside down or not? You might need a negative. K So that would be from the period. So if you need to find the k value, it's 2 pi divided by the period of the actual graph you see. That will equal your k value. Your d is your phase shift. Your c is your y equals c, is the equation of the axis. So you find the equation of the axis, the number you find turns out to be your vertical translation. All right, that's the end of the video, folks. So 6.3 and 6.4. Take care. Have a good night.